All right. Hello and welcome, folks, to the webinar here in the Zoom room and the live stream. Hello as well to everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'll give it a minute or so for participants to join us here in the Zoom and to connect to the live stream. And if you're watching this recording, welcome to you as well in the future, to future you. My name is Lee-Sean Huang. I am the Director of Design Content and Learning here at AIGA, and we're here for an open house for our portfolio development studio. I have a brief presentation. I also want to introduce some of our guest experts who are here in the Zoom with me right now. We have another guest expert who's going to drop in a little bit later. And then we also want to take your questions and hear from you about your needs, what your concerns are about your own portfolios, what your interests are. Right now I'm in screen share mode, so I can't see all of the chat things, but feel free to introduce yourselves. Tell us where you're tuning in from, maybe a little bit about yourselves. Take this opportunity to be a little self-promotional. That's totally cool as well. And if you do have questions at any time, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or in the chat, but the Q&A helps us keep things a little bit organized. And once we finish the formal part of the program, we'll just open it up and hopefully talk to you and get your questions. So hi, Ace in Reno, Nevada. Thanks for breaking the ice there in the chat. All right, so just a little bit about this course. In case you haven't had a chance to check out our website about the course, you can drop the URL here, aij.org/portfolio development studio. And as I just passed this slide, this course really revolves around this central question of how do we show the work we've done to get the work we want to do? At AIGA, we have been running our portfolio festival for 2 years now, since the start of the pandemic. It was part of our new line of online programming. We're doing it again this summer in July. And if you've never attended one of our portfolio festivals, it's a week-long festival. We have guest speakers. We have some private portfolio reviews with different industry experts and designers, creative directors from different subfields of design. We also have speakers and keynotes, workshops about your portfolio and getting a job in general in this climate, in this world. And what we've noticed as we've done this for a couple of years and we're ready to do our third one is that some folks need a little bit more structure. You know, you might have had a portfolio class if you went to school for design, whether for undergrad or you did an MFA, but not everyone has that formal academic background, or maybe like me, you graduated a long time ago, or you've actually pivoted since you got out of school to maybe a different creative subfield, and you're trying to figure out how do you reinvent yourself, or how do you tell your story? How do you connect these dots? I know for myself, there's tons of work from my past that I'm proud of, I really enjoyed being a part of, that aren't necessarily the things that I want to do more of, or it's not what I'm known for today. And so how do we talk about that transformation? So that's the question for this course. I want to go through a little bit of just the logistics and the structure of the course. I'll introduce our guest experts who are here today, and also introduce the ones who couldn't make it in person for the open house today. And then I also want to give away some freebies as well, just some things and ideas to think about for your own portfolio, because the value of this course really is in the community and the structure. It's not some hidden knowledge. You could also just search online. There's tons of things on YouTube, things on blogs and other publications where you can get this. The value really is this direct access to these experts and to your peers. And so I want to try to give away as much as possible to make this accessible and maybe to entice you to sign up. So here's the URL again. A little bit more about me, and then I'll introduce our other guest experts. I am leading this course. I'll be facilitating the course over the 10 weeks this summer. My background is pretty varied, but I have been working here at AIGA since 2018. I am a design educator myself. I have taught at the School of Visual Arts in New York, at the Parsons School of Design, both in the New York campus and the Paris campus and online. I've taught at NYU in the past as well. And I have experience running a studio prior to joining AIGA as a staff member. My studio is called FUSA, which I started back in 2013, and it has evolved over the years from a branding and UX studio to doing more service design. And in the most recent incarnation before the pandemic, we were also doing a lot of experiential learning, facilitation and workshops in corporate environments and in team environments. And so my design career has touched upon a lot of different aspects of design, but I'm kind of proudly a generalist in this sense. And part of this course is also me dealing with my own, I think, issues of my own creative identity, my own creative practice, and how I tell that story. And I also need to update my headshot. That's my long-haired persona from last summer. All right, we have Jessica Gardner next. She's here and able to introduce herself, and I'll just briefly introduce her. I first met her in the context of the Portfolio Festival from 2 years ago. She's joined us for a couple years already. She's an expert communication coach who specializes in working with creatives. I saw on LinkedIn and on YouTube, she's recently been launching and doing these video series where she does these mini portfolio reviews. She has a background in teaching ESL as well, English as a second language. So I know with my teaching, I get a lot of students who come from overseas, from abroad, who speak English as a second or even third language. And so I think language is really important too, showing your work and then how do you talk about it. So yeah, Jessica, welcome to the open house. Love to hear more about you and your practice. And yeah, say hello to our attendees today.
All right, thanks, Lee-Sean. It's a lovely introduction. I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, as you said, my background was a little bit circuitous. I started, my undergrad was in studio art, and then my first job was doing design at a newspaper, and I've sort of dabbled in freelance graphic design over the years. But I don't know, I moved to California and, worked for an admin for a while and just wasn't really finding my place. And so then I sort of got called to get into the field of ESL, as you mentioned, and I really found my passion with teaching and helping students. And I studied abroad for a while. I got my master's in teaching ESL, but then I got a job working at the Academy of Art University, and it's kind of where it all clicked because I got to work with artists and designers. So I was sort of back in that art environment doing the thing that I love, teaching and helping people, but in an artsy environment that really energizes me and gives me a lot of creative ideas and inspiration. So it was like the perfect mix, and I really enjoyed doing that. I taught there for about 5 years. I taught English. So I helped those students with all of the tasks, the language tasks that you need, to be able to present your work, to defend it in a critique, to express yourself and your ideas. And I really love that. And so even though I decided to leave that position, I wanted to keep doing that. And so I started my own coaching company called Artglish, and I've been doing that for about 5 years now. And in the beginning, I was more focused on the ESL community since that was my background, and I love helping those folks. But what I've discovered is that I started doing workshops such as the AIGA Portfolio Festival, and I discovered through those workshops that there are actually a lot of native English speakers who are looking for this kind of support as well, because storytelling is hard and it's difficult to be able to tell your personal story in a unique way, but in a way that connects with your audience and really helps to show your value, especially if you're new and you're hitting the job market for the first time. It's really intimidating. And so many people are struggling with imposter syndrome that, I just really felt like kind of expanding my business to include everybody was, sort of the way to go. So I'm kind of pivoting a little bit in how I market myself, but yeah, helping people tell their story in a unique way and connect with their audience is kind of my passion. So that's what I'm hoping to bring to the Portfolio Development Studio.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this and being here today. I also wanted to say hi to the folks on the LinkedIn stream. The chat is heating up over there. It looks like we have Danielle from Lithuania, who's currently in the UK. We've got Pakistan, Lebanon, someone from Alejandra from Costa Rica, who's currently in Maryland, DC area, a couple people from Maryland, actually. Kurt's from Long Island, Pacific Northwest representing. So we've got like all across the country, all over the world. Thank you all for tuning in today. Let's go to our next guest introduction here. We have Jo-Nell Sieren as well. She is here in the Zoom chat and she can answer questions and say hello in the chat here. She's getting over something and lost her voice, so she can't join us on camera and on mic right now, but she can type and answer your questions. She actually does this stuff as her day-to-day job. She is the Assistant Director of Industry Relations for Columbia College, Chicago, but she has a background herself as a designer and also a photographer. She graduated with a degree in photography from SVA, the School of Visual Arts, in fact. So she's both a practitioner and somebody who's a professional who works with students who are graduating into the workforce and also liaises with the industry side. So she can see a little bit of both ends, like what's going on in terms of student portfolios, what people are talking about, how they're presenting their work, and also some of the expectations that companies who are recruiting are looking for from not just design portfolios, but other creative practitioners as well. And she's also a longtime member of AIGA. She's been on the board in our Chicago chapter as well. So she's here to answer your questions. You can learn more about her on our site as well. So welcome, Jo-Nell, and then I'll introduce the other folks as well. Seth Johnson couldn't make it in person for the open house today, but he is a design leader at IBM, formerly of the AIGA Minneapolis chapter, now based in New York City. He's also teaches at the Parsons School of Design, and he really has experience with building design teams at this massive enterprise scale at an organization like IBM as a practitioner and now as a leader as well in all of this. And he's also, I didn't mention earlier, he teaches at Parsons, but he's also visiting faculty at Art Center College of Design as well. So he spans that from the world of being a practitioner in big enterprise as well as teaching. And when I asked him actually to join us, he actually was saying, disclaimer, he doesn't have a portfolio at the moment because a lot of his work has been in this corporate environment. And I said, that's totally okay, because he's looking at portfolios all the time in terms of the designers who report to him, the folks who are looking for jobs on his team, etc., but also that the portfolio is both an artifact, something that we can polish and create and really refine, but it's also a state of mind, right? It's a mindset. It's our ability to tell stories about our work, to connect the dots. It's all of these things. It's the language we use as well. So we will talk about some of the nitty gritty of how you present a portfolio. And I saw that question here in LinkedIn about websites and things like that. So there's that kind of tactical presentation end of things, but I think there's also this wider mindset of how we think about our portfolios and how we think about our work. So you can learn more about Seth on our site as well. And then I'll pre-introduce Talia, and she said she's going to join us a little bit later. But Talia is a designer and coder. She's worked with the Michael Beirut and Georgia Lupi teams at Pentagram. She spans this world of visual design and coding, and she has an education background as well. And so Talia can talk more about her work and herself when she gets here. So that's an intro, but to kind of sum up this section of the introductions of who we are, you'll get me every week on Wednesdays this summer. Let's see, I have the dates up here. Wednesdays, we launch June 8th and go to August 10th. So it's 10 sessions over 10 weeks, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern time. Tried to make this as convenient for folks as possible so you can tune in anywhere you can get on Zoom. But we also know that schedules change, work things come up, personal and family things come up. So we'll be recording the sessions as well. And we'll also have an online space for participants to interact in between the live sessions. And so the curriculum itself is going to be a mix of prompts and of group critiques, as well as some guest lectures and guest crits from our guest experts. And we have a couple more guest experts who are still talking to and getting confirmed, and we'll introduce them as we go along. So that's the basic format. Just go through this a little bit, but our early bird pricing goes for another few days. So it ends on May 16th. Non-member pricing is $8.99. Member pricing is $6.99. If you become an AIGA member, if you're not a member, it basically pays for itself if you go to any other paid AIGA event this year. And so that's something to consider before our prices go up after May 16th. You can learn more on the website. To give an overview of the curriculum and preview of the curriculum, we'll be talking about curation. So looking at the work that you've done already, how do you choose that? How do you narrow it down, whittle it down? But we'll also have some prompts for creating new things, maybe some self-initiated projects, things that you might want to do to complement your client work or the things that you've done in-house. We'll focus on presentation skills. You have a chance to practice in a safe environment with a small group and getting feedback of experts like Jessica and Jo-Nell and our other guest experts to refine your storytelling, both verbally and what you write in your about me statements, things like that. Talked about that guidance and that feedback, also the support of your peers. As I mentioned before, a lot of the value of this course is that you're part of a cohort. We're in this together, in this group of accountability as well, because I've found for my own practice too, it's sometimes hard flying solo with this stuff or just kind of doing this yourself. So having that support group that you can go to every week for 10 weeks, I think is super important, and having that online space for us. And ultimately, this is about confidence, right? I think there's something really vulnerable about putting yourself out there. Your portfolio is like a representation of who you are, who we are as designers, as creative practitioners, all of this sort of stuff. And so how do you put that stuff out confidently, realizing that there's a lot of subjectivity out there, there's a lot of rejection that happens. It's just a natural part of this process. So how do you get ready for that and put yourself out there? Okay. Here's the URL again, and then I'll just go through a few other things and then we can go straight to your questions. This is my own opinion and what is going through some of the pedagogy and the design of this course. But as I mentioned earlier, your portfolio shows the things that you've done, your assets, right, your artifacts, but it's also a way of showing your process, talking about your point of view as a designer, as a creative professional. And we often think about our portfolios as a prop, right? You might have a print portfolio depending on the kind of design that you do, or it's most likely online or in a PDF. And it's something that you show to potential clients and employers. But I also like to think about your portfolio as a whole prop department, right? It's your capacity to pull things out. Like maybe you're showing something and it's falling flat, it's not as relevant to your potential client, but maybe you have things in your back pocket that you can pull out, or just this ability to on the fly pull together different pieces of your work that you can tailor to different job applications if you're applying to different organizations. Okay, so this is the freebie part. I wanted to give away some of the assignments or some of the prompts that I use for myself and for my students and folks that I coach. This one is called 20-10-5, and it's just a way of whittling things down because I think a portfolio is always reductive, right? We're always more than our portfolios. We have so much experience, we've done so much stuff, but folks looking at our portfolios, folks who are looking at our job applications have limited time. And so the idea here is you can think about this in units of like slides, if this is a slide deck or photos, images, whatever that unit is, but say start with 20 slides about your work. So it doesn't have to be 20 projects. It could be like 2 or 3 slides per project. And the reason why I start with 20 is it's the number of slides that are in like a Pecha Kucha or a lightning talk kind of presentation, right? So if you ever had to give one of those, you get 20 slides. And so that's a good place to start, but then whittling it down to like 10, the number of fingers most of us have, and then to 5 fingers on one hand. going through this process, putting things on a board or printing things out, whittling things down, it sounds simple, but it's surprisingly difficult. So that's something we'll do with group feedback and support. So that's one prompt for you to think about as you're putting together your portfolio. Another one is this meal metaphor. Apologies to folks who have not had lunch yet. But I used to work in Brazil. I worked for an agency called Purpose that had an office down in Rio. And this is considered the national dish in Brazil, the feijoada. It's like a bean stew with rice. And you see these side dishes here. But pick a meal of your choice. But as you're composing a plate for a buffet or a meal or a feast or something like that, there's different aspects of that meal that you can think about as a metaphor for your portfolio. And so with the feijoada metaphor here, you have the rice and beans that are the substance, right? They're what make you full when you eat this. That's like the main event here. And for a design portfolio, that is your table stakes. This is showing like you can do the work that you say you can do, that you have the chops to do so, right? But there's tons of people who have those sort of basic chops. This is just your, as I said, table stakes. This is the cost to entry that you are truly a player. Then on the feijoada plate, you have to have the orange slices and your collard greens or your kale. And that's really the sustenance. That's where you're getting your vitamins, right? The oranges provide some sweet and sour to act as a counterpoint to the heaviness of the rice and beans. And so these are the things that might set you apart a little bit or be a counterpoint to your sort of bread and butter or your rice and beans kind of work to show maybe a little bit more character or to show something that sets you apart. And not in the picture, but I think is an essential part of a feijoada plate is a generous helping of hot sauce as well. And so this is like the spice that you're adding to it, right? What are some of the things that you do that set you apart or make you more memorable, give you an edge beyond just the basic rice and beans and the counterpoint there? So I don't know if you have any food metaphors for what you were thinking about in terms of your portfolio, but I like to draw in some of these other things for how we talk about our portfolios. All right, just one more kind of freebie giveaway. I have another assignment and another prompt called the creative lineage, which is about mapping how you got to where you are for any given project. So you could take a given project, like I made a promo video, like a 1-minute spot to promote this course. And I've started mapping out, like, how did I do that, right? And it all goes all the way back for me to having a video class in high school where I learned how to edit video, or more recently working with a presentation coach to work on my breath and my voice and just to feel more free with my voice. And it connects to other things too, like I did the background music for that video. So that goes back to like piano lessons and all of that. So just mapping all of those things out helps us. It sets gives us a visual image of like, wow, these are our experiences that have led us to be able to do any given creative project. And it also helps us when we're writing our about me statements or just on the fly being able to talk about any given project. It helps us map out that language and that history as we go back and understand like, wow, our technique, our expertise comes from somewhere. All right, so that is all for the presentation today. Learn more and sign up at this link here that we'll post about, but I'll exit out of screen share now and just open it up. We have some great questions from our audience members here in the Zoom and on LinkedIn, so I'll just get to that. All right. So let's just go back, try to take these in order if I can. Anjali has a question about, what's your opinion about building a website for our work? I can take this, and Jo-Nell and Jessica, by all means, jump in. Jessica's been looking at a lot of people's websites. For me, my website is like constantly a work in progress. I know that there's some sensitivities for designers who have portfolio items that might be like under an NDA and non-disclosure, so you can't really show that. I think there's ways around it, whether you password protect it or you ask your client, can you like scrub identifying materials, which I think works for some UX stuff, but not always for branding stuff, right? Obviously, because it's branded for your client's materials. I've also done portfolios that are like a PDF that I can send people online. But yeah, curious, Jessica, if you have any thoughts about websites.
Sure. Like you said, I look at different websites a lot, and I would say, maybe one of the things to really think about as you're making that decision is who is your audience, because I feel like one of the mistakes I see people making, or one of the concerns I have for people, is that they're trying to like talk to everybody with their portfolio, and the way you would design your portfolio, to apply for a job is very different than like if you're trying to attract freelance clients or something like that. So, just really be thinking about how you tell your story through your portfolio for your specific audience, and just focus on that goal, because when you're designing your website, there's so many things you can do, and it's very tempting to like add this and make this look cool and put some of this in here, and sometimes that can distract from the main point of what you're writing for. And so, thinking about that ultimate goal, and then creating everything in your portfolio and telling that story in a way that helps you get, your audience's attention and get to that goal is kind of the thing to try to focus on.
Yeah, and I would also add, it is helpful to like have something, whether it's like yourname.com or the name of your studio. Because I know Instagram is great, folks get gigs there, or LinkedIn, but it's good to have something that you own and that you can control, even if you are also on these platforms. Let's see, Jo-Nell says, she agrees with Jessica, it would be digestible. Also, passwords can hinder recruiters, but NDA work can be gently shared in an interview. Yeah, that's a great point there as well. Let's take some of the questions here in Zoom, and we'll jump back to the LinkedIn questions. I think this is a great one to start with for Jessica, actually. Ace wants to know, do you think an artist statement is necessary?
Well, there again, I guess it depends on your audience, because, usually the focus of an artist statement is to help your audience understand and appreciate your work, especially if you're doing something that is maybe not super obvious to people. You want to get them beyond the point of just being like, oh, that looks nice, or, that looks interesting. You want them to understand why you're doing it, the choices you made, and the reasons you're doing it, why you're doing it, how you feel like that tells your story, or shows your value if you're trying to use your portfolio to get a job. Again, it kind of depends on your goal and your audience. But yeah, I think if you feel like an artist statement would help you connect with your audience and help them to appreciate your work, then I think it's great to include one.
Awesome. Yeah, I would just add on to that, you may not call it an artist statement depending on your audience, right? It could just be part of your about me and your bio, but rather than the bio just being like a prose version of your resume, it could be something that reflects your personality, your point of view, or your approach to design. So again, thinking about your audience first is something we'll address in the course as well, and how you tailor that to that audience, or maybe different audiences if you have different audiences you're trying to reach out to. And Jo-Nell was saying that statements are great for cohesive bodies of work, more on the side of fine art as well. So it's a way to connect the dots on your pieces of work. Linnea has a question about ordering projects chronologically, or should we order them chronologically, or how they see fit? I've always done it more like thematically, but I don't know if Jessica, Jo-Nell, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I think the advice that I've kind of heard too is, kind of like what you said earlier, you want to narrow down the number of projects somehow, and, show your best work first, because if your audience probably isn't going to take the time to like, look at every little thing that you put on your website, so you just want to make sure that whatever they're seeing first and whatever the focus is your strongest work. And even though I think my impression generally is that you want sort of it to be recent and relevant, to the task that you're applying for. But I think the strength of the work is more important than the chronology, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I'm seeing some of the comments here. Well, Jo-Nell is agreeing. She says, you might only have 10 seconds of a hiring manager's time. So lead with your best work. I've been working for nearly 20 years. And so I don't know if things from like 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, are often super relevant to the stuff I'm doing now. Like, I think there might be some pieces, whether it's like something that won an award or something that's worth revisiting from the past that's within my top 5, for example. But yeah, I would lead with the strongest work first, or also like the stuff that you want more of, right? Like there's stuff that I've done in the past, as I said, that I'm proud of, but I don't necessarily want to do that today. So I don't need to emphasize that or even have that at all at this point. All right, Sumaya has a great question because I feel like this is my ongoing challenge as well. What's your advice for people who are a jack of all trades and each of their successful works are in different mediums? There's a few techniques. I'll start at Jessica and Jo-Nell, feel free to jump in as well. So I've seen some people have like very different portfolios for different things, right? Like maybe you are like both a photographer and in an art director or something, and you might have two different parts of that. Or like for my work, I do a lot of stuff that's more facilitation based and doing training and workshops that doesn't necessarily have like visual artifacts to show per se. And so that's one like stream, I guess, of like freelance work that I do that might be like press clippings or just clips of me giving a talk or hosting a podcast, compared to like the visual stuff that I do that could be in a different portfolio. So I might separate that or just have those in different sections. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see, Jo-Nell saying you would try to pick a lane that meets what you're applying for. You can partition your site for things that go together, maybe design and illustration. So again, like make it easy for people to find which track you're applying for.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that too. I think again, depending on how you want to tell the story about yourself, even if you have work that's kind of in different areas, if there's like a central theme, like something that you feel like kind of shows what you're passionate about or shows, something that you bring in terms of your value that's kind of present in everything you do, that might be a way to kind of connect everything. But, it takes some time to think about those things.
Wonderful. All right. There's some questions here about what exactly is a PDF portfolio. Been asked to give one to some jobs and it gets me confused because I do have a portfolio website. Okay. Hi, Talia's here. Why don't we briefly address the PDF question, and then I'll introduce Talia formally and bring her in as well. So PDF portfolio is literally just a PDF file. I know sometimes with like, certain organizations, when I've been on this side of hiring, we've like printed out people's things and like given them to like the next level of higher boss who may not have the time to look at people's different websites or deal with logins or things like that. And they just want something physical to look at in addition to the candidates' resumes and things like that. So sometimes that is helpful to just have a PDF thing that you could either send as a link or as an attachment. I know it's kind of a pain if you already have a portfolio website, but I think it is helpful sometimes to just follow the specifications of a given company that you're applying for, because you don't know what's going on internally about how they organize information. And if they ask for that PDF, like may just have to copy and paste or just format it in a different way. And then Jo-Nell was also chiming in the chat. A printed portfolio you might think of as a piece of publication design, something you could submit to different positions. So it's also a great thing to bring into an interview as well. All right, Talia has joined us on the Zoom. Welcome, Talia. I'll briefly introduce her. Talia Cotton is a designer and coder. She specializes in the intersection of branding and technology. She currently leads the design and development of data-driven and algorithmic brand identities at Pentagram, where she works with Michael B. Root and Georgia Lupi. She's also a colleague at the Parsons School of Design. She teaches advanced interaction there as well. So Talia, welcome to the open house.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lee-Sean, for welcoming me. Super excited to be here.
Awesome. So I know I gave you a brief introduction. I had Jessica and Jo-Nell also talk a little bit more about themselves. Is there anything you wanted to add to your self-introduction before we went back to audience questions?
I think you covered it a lot, but I'll elaborate a little bit on that. So I specialize in the intersection of branding and coding. There are a lot of, so right now we're seeing a sort of a turn in the design world where more and more people are interested in the possibilities of what coding can do for whatever the design outputs are, whether that's a brand, whether that's a publication design. What we're finding now is that while there is interest for people to understand what is possible with code, there's actually very few people, and especially very few leaders in design companies that kind of not just know how to code, but know what to do with someone who knows how to code. So there's a huge opportunity right now in not just people who know how to code, but people who know how to design well using old traditional design practices with using this new tool. So leaning into the fact that it can be interactive, leaning into the fact that it can be generative. In my job, I'll just say one more thing. Even though my focus and passion and everything that I do is really about involving code into the design process, so much of my job here at Pentagram, whenever we work on brand identities or any sort of design project, the first question is really, well, does it even make sense for something to be made with code? And the reality is very few things do. Just because I do that, I'm not going to say to a cultural institution, you need an interactive logo if it doesn't make sense for them. So the majority of the time I'm working on just good, basic, traditional graphic design as we know it. But that's sort of like my added approach to the more special things that I like to do as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction and for explaining that. Before you got here, Talia, I was showing a metaphor. So I was comparing like how you put together a portfolio to like composing a plate, like for a meal at a buffet. And I was given this example of like this Brazilian bean stew and how like the rice and beans are like the main event, right? And in your case, it's brand identities. But the thing that sets you apart might be like the house hot sauce, which in your case is like the coding bit. And so I was just introducing this metaphor for folks to think about, like how do they compose a portfolio as like a selection of like, this is what they can do, this is the basics, but there's something maybe different that sets them apart or is a value add.
Yeah, and at the same time, I've been teaching students how to code for a really long time at this point, and I find that a lot of my students love it, dive into it, and start to have every single project in their universities have code in some way. And you would think that would kind of, when they put together their portfolio, if 100% of their projects are like, what was it that you said, Lee-Sean, the rice and beans, like the thing? If every single portfolio in their project is the rice and beans, they find that in their interviews, the people are like, well, this is great. I'm so happy you know how to code, but do you have anything like basic graphic design? So a little bit of both, a little bit of like the special thing that you do, but also just showing them that you know the basics, you know how to set type, you know how to make a good brand, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, thank you for like expanding on that and validating that idea. I'm seeing a couple questions that are related, so I'll connect them. Somebody here in the Q&A in Zoom is asking about how they talk about themselves in a LinkedIn profile. Should it be cohesive, meaning that they should just say one thing, like they're just a UX designer, or they just do logo design or advertising, or how do they deal with that if they have like different, I guess, verticals that they work in? And then let's see. Yeah, I think that's kind of the main question here of like, how do they talk about this? And we've talked about this a little bit before, like you might have like 2 sections on your portfolio site, or how do you address this? And Talia, you might be good to expand on this first as well, since you do have like the coding thing and then the kind of what you were saying, the bread and butter graphic design. Like, how do you direct people, I guess, into like, what is your starting point? Oh, you're on mute.
What I do is, it always is going to depend on the platform that I'm talking about myself and the people to whom I'm talking about myself. If I'm in an interview, the way that I talk about myself is slightly different than how I talk about myself at the beginning of a client call that is about a website design, which is totally different from how I talk about myself at LinkedIn. At the top level, if I'm talking to people, just graphic designers as a whole, I talk about the main course. I talk about I talk about the rice and beans. I talk about what it is, that special thing that makes me apart. Talia Cotton, the sentence that I use is, Talia Cotton is a designer and coder, and I specialize in the intersection of branding and technology. If your rice and beans is you're an illustrator in that basic like LinkedIn top of website, that one sentence, the first page in your portfolio, you say, XYZ, my name is and then you put whatever that headline is that kind of people understand without looking at your work, without looking at everything else. Just understand in one thing what makes you special, what makes you your graphic designer and your passion.
Awesome. Jo-Nell's typing here in the chat saying, that's great, Talia. I approach LinkedIn profile as an elevator pitch about what you do and what you are about. For example, mine or Jo-Nell's includes her photograph, design teaching, advising, and mentorship. So you can think about that too, of like, it's kind of a menu of the things that you offer. Jessica, you're nodding your head. Is there anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like LinkedIn is a little bit different because, you've got all your experience there. So you've kind of got like the resume portion, and then you've got, the about section or the summary or whatever they call it, like your opportunity to kind of tell a story about yourself. And then, like, as Talia was saying at the top, you've sort of got like the headline. So, it kind of depends on, what your goal is. Again, giving people the information they need as quickly as possible so that they see what you're about and they can like find what they want. And then if they want to take the time to read your story and kind of see how all these things connect, they can.
Hi, everyone. This is Emily Oberman. She says hi to everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Emily.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
Lovely
not at all.
It's lovely to see all of you.
Thank you for visiting, Emily.
I'm so sorry.
Let's see. Let's jump back.
Yeah, GA.
She said.
Awesome. I think there's some follow-up questions about what we were talking about before with PDFs. I think it might be helpful to clarify. Sean on LinkedIn was saying this point about like, if you've already sent a PDF portfolio and then you get an actual interview, does it make sense to bring that PDF onto like an iPad to show in the interview, or should you have a physical book printed out? I'd love to hear what our other experts say, but for me, I feel like it depends. I haven't done a print design project in years, and it's not like I might do it if a friend commissions it and they really want to work with me on that, but that's not really like the core of what I do. So having a printed book doesn't really help me. I'd rather just have the iPad because most of the things I show were meant to be seen on screens, but I think it depends, but I'd love to hear from our other experts if they have any thoughts.
If I may, it's a great question, and so much. The short answer is yes, totally. Even if you send us a PDF or anyone a PDF ahead of time, there is nothing quite like the most important thing in an interview is your voiceover for your projects. I've seen so many portfolios that look amazing, and then as soon as we ask the questions to the designer to say, what's the background? What challenges were you faced with? What is sort of like the problem and solution of this project? If you're unable to sort of articulate that, it doesn't matter how good your portfolio is. So don't worry about actually walking through the actual PDF if you've sent it to us already. When it comes to printed things, I know there are a couple of things that were said and they're totally valid. I know in my personal experience, we find that as far as your portfolio goes, I would likely show it over something more digital like a PDF or a website or whatever it is. But then as Lee-Sean was saying, or not so much, it's just kind of like a value add. If in addition to all of that, you come in to, if you're interviewing for something that is like an editorial position or a print something position, there is something nice about bringing in the physical thing because we are then able to kind of like look at the paper that you use, look at the production, look at the typography really close, kind of analyze it from a different perspective. And it shows that you care. If you don't do that, that's fine too, but it's kind of like whatever that extra step is to let us interact with your stuff a little bit more.
Jessica, you're nodding. Do you have something to add, or are you just vigorously agreeing?
Well, that too. Yeah. I think, I agree with Talia again that of course, if they give specifics, you want to make sure that you follow whatever directions you're given. But yeah, there's no magic bullet. Like if you do this, then you'll be successful. It's not necessarily about, is it printed, is it digital? It's, a wow factor. What can you do to stand out? What can you do to set yourself apart, to show that you really want it, impress your audience?
Wonderful. We have a couple questions from like recent graduates or somebody here in the chat saying they're a graphic design student taking a break from school due to health issues and want to jump back into things. But I think the general question here is like, for somebody just starting out, what is like a good place to start in terms of like number of projects, or how do they go about this if they only have, say, student projects, or they're just starting out their freelance practice and they don't have a whole lot yet? What's a good place to start for folks like that? For me, it's been a while since I was just starting out, so I'm wondering, I don't know, Jo-Nell, I know you work with students, or Jessica, you have coaching clients, but is there some thoughts from folks you work with who are maybe just starting out that you could share with us as more general advice?
Sure. I think, when you're just starting, part of what's challenging is, like I was saying earlier, kind of finding what you offer that's unique, how you can tell your story or show your value in a unique way. So, to someone who's just starting, I guess I usually encourage taking a little time for self-reflection, really thinking about what it is that you feel you're great at and what it is that you want to do and how you can communicate that to your intended audience if it's the job market. And looking at other portfolios and seeing how other people are doing that, not to copy them, but to get inspiration. That's something that I encourage a lot is, finding other people who are doing what you want to do and seeing how they tell that story effectively or how they can make their project stand out. And then think about like, well, how can I do that? How can I show some continuity between my projects and show, even if they're just student projects, there's still a lot you can do that kind of shows your, what you're good at, your value, what your passion is, if you take that time to self-reflect.
Thank you. There was also some chat stuff going on about asking about a straight PDF versus PDF flipbook, and Jo-Nell was saying not so into the simulation of a printed piece on screen. Folks might not get all the way to the end, so you might as well just have the PDF be a PDF rather than trying to add any effects to make it look like you're turning the page. And Jo-Nell was also saying she has her students conduct research of where they want to be as well. So you could also, really benchmark that to compare yourselves with other candidates for the kinds of places that you might want to go. One question from Rebecca, which is getting a lot of likes on LinkedIn in the stream, is how do you protect your portfolio work from being stolen? We actually just did some workshops on this in our design and business conference last week. We had some lawyers give some advice for this, which I am not a lawyer, but there are ways to register your copyrights if you're in the US. If you're outside of the US, I'm not sure how this works. Technically, if you make a work that's not a work for hire as a designer, as any creative person, you have the copyright to it, but if you register it, it does make it easier if you need to issue a takedown or sue somebody or something like that. It's never come up for me, so I don't quite know, but I don't know if folks have had to deal with anything like this or have advice on how to deal with this.
I have an answer that's not going to be helpful, which is kind of an anti-answer. Speaking from someone whose work I've seen my work directly inspire, for lack of a better term, other people's work that I've shown them. I wouldn't go as far as to say steal, just because you can't prove that something is stolen unless it's the direct thing. And my own I don't know the legalities of any of that, and I'd love to hear more of what Lee-Sean was talking about. But I know that my own, I guess, approach to that philosophically is that I always say there's a lot more that where that came from, and I just, if I keep doing what I do and I keep just making more stuff, then eventually I will get recognized for V 2.0 of whatever that original idea was.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it also depends on like if this is, a brand that you made for yourself, for your own company, and you're trying to protect that, that's like a trademark issue where you should consult with a lawyer or go through that process. There's a lot of gray areas that where IP law doesn't really protect creators in like fashion and certain things like that, right? You can't really like copyright a dress, for example, right? I have friends who are industrial designers who have had their like pens and other designs like stolen by actually the factories that were making their stuff. And so there's all sorts of things that happen there. It's harder to get away with on the internet these days, but there are stories about like big brands like being very inspired by independent designers' work. And I think a lot of it is just like, figuring out what you want to do, right? If you want to lawyer up, or is it a way to kind of make sure that people know that you were the originator of that, if you had published it, if you have the receipts to show, and like use that to make more work or to build your reputation. I think there's some real pros and cons to talk through with a lawyer if you're really in that kind of situation. All right, let's see. We've got another 10 minutes or so to take some questions. So let's see what else we have from our audience here. Oh, this is another really big, multifaceted question. Ola is asking, what are some tips to overcome imposter syndrome? We in fact have a whole course that we are doing. There's a new cohort for that coming out. That is our Career Introverts course. So it's focused on designers and other creative practitioners who self-identify as introverts, and imposter syndrome is a big part of that. So that is addressed in that course. But in terms of what we could talk about today, I don't know if our experts, do you have anything to chime in for that? I have to think about my own response here, but it's a great question.
There's really two kinds of imposter syndrome, right? There's like pre-success imposter syndrome and post-success imposter syndrome. I think for post-success imposter syndrome, where you've already achieved what it was that you wanted, and suddenly you still think that you don't belong. I can tell you every single person at my company has this, every single person, and it continues, and it just doesn't go away. But in order to get over that is just to dive in and do the work, and just sort of like let the goodness of your work be the thing that lets you eventually recognize it for yourself. And for the former, which is something that I think is actually a little bit more of an issue, and I relate to it heavily because I know that in a weird way, learning how to code is kind of like, it's the voice that says, I won't be able to do this. I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. I'm not whatever enough. I'm not creative enough to apply it to apply to code to design. And I know it also, when it comes to applying for jobs, I've spoken to a lot of students and people who I know who see an opening at a job here, somewhere else really great, and just don't apply because they say, and I'm guilty of this too, just don't apply because they say, well, I won't get it. The answer is easier said than done, which is just do it. Like, just dive in, just like apply, hit that send button, just take that class, just like make that thing. And eventually just like fighting that imposter syndrome is the thing that's going to get you over it. Because otherwise, if you're not changing the pot a little, then you're not doing much.
Yeah, I'll build on that and say, like, sometimes these job descriptions are written by people who don't know a whole lot about things. Like, I've seen things that are like, must have 15 years of Figma experience, right? And like, Figma hasn't even been around for that long, or like, 25 years of social media experience, and so sometimes these are just kind of arbitrary things that were people who write them aren't necessarily the people who are the experts in these areas. And other times it's like, it's a aspirational thing. You don't have to like literally tick all of the boxes to get hired. Sometimes Talia was sharing about coding. I used to teach in the computer science department at NYU because I was teaching a web design and coding class there. I have an art degree, and like some of the things that I would see in the department about like computer science, I have like no idea what this was all about. But like, you know, I was qualified to teach the class. They hired me to teach the class. It was a great place to be exposed to some of this more advanced computer science stuff and to learn some of it. But you know, it's people want you, they're there for a reason. And then there's almost like this reverse Dunning-Kruger effect at play too. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is this cognitive bias, which I think we see a lot in our politics and in our media commentary. But basically it's like where people with limited knowledge feel like they overestimate what they know about something. And there's actually the opposite end of that curve, which is like, I'm starting to feel that more and more now, like 2 decades into my career, where it's like the more I know, the more that I know that I don't know anything. You know what I mean? So that's also something that happens with experience. It doesn't actually go away. You might actually have like more doubts, but it's still something to just kind of work through and to keep going and keep making.
The one thing I'll add to that, just super quick, is for what it's worth, for anyone listening on the call, our most recent hire for a senior designer on Michael Beirut's team was someone who didn't have a graphic design background. And the fact, if that's the kind of thing that's going through your head, where I don't really have the right background, if you just apply, you never know what could happen as long as you're sort of following your passions.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that too, because I feel like in the people I work with, this is one of the things that comes up all the time, that people feel like, you know, when they're trying to tell their story and create their portfolio, especially for the first time, they have a tendency to try to like make it like everybody else's because they're trying to fit in. And what I keep saying is that, you know, you really need to figure out what makes you stand out and what makes you different, and then present that as an asset, because almost every time I feel like the thing that people are trying to kind of hide or downplay is the thing that will really get their attention. And so if you can overcome that fear to be like, oh, but my background is different, use it to get their attention. And most of the time it works out.
Awesome. So we have about 3 minutes left. I think this is a good opportunity to maybe have some like final thoughts from our guest experts, because it looks like the audience questions are winding down a bit. But just for mine, and I'll buy some time for our guest experts to continue on this, like, how do you don't necessarily have to like hide your deficits, right? There's a great book by a Harvard professor. I need to look up her name, but the other example I'll give while I look up the Harvard professor's book is Eminem and 8 Mile, right? If you remember that movie, and it's like basically the climax of that movie in that rap battle is like, yes, I'm like a white dude from the wrong side of 8 Mile, and I live in a trailer with my mom, but like, this is what I can do, right? I mean, it's like totally cheesy motivational stuff, but rather than like hiding who he is, which like he literally couldn't on that stage, he just kind of went into it and said like, this is who I am, and like, this is still what I can do. And so I think that's another example of the kind of phenomenon we're looking at. I'm going to look up this book so I can recommend it correctly, but Jessica and Talia, do you have some final thoughts for our audience today?
Sure. The other thing I would add, I guess, is just that, you know, I think part of the benefit of building, you know, a community like what you're doing here with this new course is to help each other and support each other, so that, you know, when you feel like you're getting down on yourself with imposter syndrome, you have all these other people to, you know, encourage you and share their stories. And if you realize, yeah, I mean, because everybody says, yeah, oh, everybody feels this way, but somehow we don't believe it. And so, you know, having that community to support you and give you feedback can be really crucial to get over that step and give you the courage to just try it.
I think the 3 things that I find repeatedly just in the last year alone that the design industry and leaders are looking for in new hires is, first of all, good designers. That's always a standard. Second of all, diversity. We all know that, but really everyone is looking for diversity, not just in your racial background, but in the way that you think, because that is just as valuable in graphic design. And lastly, a lot of the design world right now is kind of looking for like that extra something new that we haven't really explored yet. And I think all that goes to say that you and your unique background and whatever it is that makes you go is really important to kind of like go forward, whether that's a hobby on the side or just something that kind of like makes you special. I think that's always really important.
Thanks so much. And we have Jo-Nell here in the chat. I'll read off her comments. Jo-Nell wants to thank everyone for being here and for having her today at this open house. And she just wants to iterate what I had said before about the peer feedback within the studio. This community is key, especially for folks who are not in school or don't have like a creative community maybe near them. So yeah, we're looking forward to the Portfolio Development Studio joining us, kicking off in June. And I looked up the book. I wanted to make sure that I got the title and the author right. So it's Laura Huang, Edge. I posted it in the chat, both on LinkedIn and here in Zoom. Edge, Turning Adversity into Advantage. She's a Harvard Business School professor who has a framework for this, and similar to what I was talking about with the M&M example, or like thinking about like, you know, what you maybe are deficient in, but leaning into that and then using that as an advantage, and how do you pivot that when you tell your story. So recommended book for everybody here. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you, Talia, Jessica, Jo-Nell, everybody joining us in the live stream today. And so hopefully we'll see you in the course, and feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions. Have a great rest of the day, rest of the week, everyone.